At the gate of every Zen temple are a pair of gate guardians, figures that symbolize, and if you're of a traditional Japanese persuasion, actively manage the entrance and exit to the temple. They're the boundary between inside and outside, between sacred and profane, between holy and secular, between special and not special. Which is something of a paradox, because didn't Bodhidharma say, when asked about the essence of Buddhism, nothing special, nothing holy. Paradox is a fundamental quality of Zen that maybe we don't explore enough. Paradox is playful, sometimes confusing, sometimes discomforting. It's the yes and no. It's the, well, from here to go north, you head south. We could paraphrase Bodhidharma's nothing special and say, oh, well, what he's talking about is not separate. Nothing separated out, nothing set apart as special. For Joko Beck, disrobing, literally taking off her robes, wearing ordinary clothes, stopping shaving her head as a nun, letting her hair grow, removing most of the ritual and a lot of the Buddhist things from the Zendo. Well, a major part of that was in the effort to become not separate, nothing special. And of course, her second book, collected Dharma talks, is actually called Nothing Special, because, well, here's a paradox. Same one we started with, really. The whole idea of monasticism, of monks and nuns, is of setting apart, setting up a different way of life. A way which is, well, in its way, again, trying to be nothing special, not separate. And the point of that is, if we live in the world, making attachments, becoming bound to things, desiring things, we're setting them up as special. There's no way around that. That's what we're doing. And so if the heart of the teaching is about nothing special, then surely we set ourselves apart where we can lead a non-special existence. Except, of course, life doesn't work like that. And in setting up our not separate, not special, separate, special way of life, we're entering into the heart of that paradox. And so Joko's disrobing, in this sense, was about being not separate from the non-specialness of ordinary life. That's really what makes it radical, because I don't think any lay Zen teacher up until Joko had really got this in the way that she did. There have been many schools, traditions, which have had very deeply realised lay teachers, many, many lay followers, but they've always been in relationship with the monastic tradition, which was doing the real thing. Full time. This separate, not special, separate, special way of life that monasticism is. And Joko's huge insight, as I keep coming back to, keep mentioning, was the fact that you can do not special. You can do not separate in everyday life. And in some ways, this is the real challenge. This is the real excitement of practice. And it's also pointing to the fact that even within that monastic, non-special, non-separate, special, separate way of life, there's an awful lot of setting up and setting apart. We have robes, we have Buddhas, we have bells, we have rituals, we have sutras, we have an awful lot to make special. We have altars, we raise up, literally. We set apart, we make special. So what's that all about? So if for the monk and the nun, home leaving is leaving one set of attachments behind, family, who you don't see again, property, which is given away for you, all the attachments of everyday life, there's still this play of special and non-special. There's a nice story by Seung Sun, the Korean teacher, and it in fact uses the title of one of his books, Dropping Ashes on the Buddha. It's one of his own little koans. I can't remember it exactly, but it's basically you're in the zendo and a guy comes in, maybe gets talking to you about emptiness, nothing specialness, and then it's just smoking away. This was written in, I think, the 70s or the 80s, and just starts to flick the ash onto the Buddha. What's your response? Do you go, yeah, well, it's nothing special? Or do you go, how outrageous? This is the guardian figure of this. This represents everything we're trying to... What's your reaction going to be? That's the koan. That's the question. In this paradox between special and non-special. Which we're doing. Whether we're in the monastery, whether we're in the zendo, whether we're outside the zendo, whether we're just living our everyday lives. So we're making choices. We're making special and non-special. And in the spirit of Joko, we can ask, how are we going to do this? What are the consequences going to be? Can we make things special intelligently? Now again, and this is something which maybe figures strongly in the monastic tradition, but cuts through the way we tend to talk about things, in the sense of, there's this other level beyond. And if we say that the Buddha figure isn't important in itself, it's because it points to a meaning. As Zazen, the bells which introduce it and end it, are not important in themselves, they just point to a meaning. Anything which established the same meaning would be equivalent. I found out exactly how untrue this was one day when I was teaching just a casual meditation session in prison, and rather ironically, the cabinet in which the Sangha bell in prison was kept was locked and we couldn't find the key. So the only thing I actually had to hand was the clappers. Let's sit. Is that really going to do it? Let's actually listen to the bell. I mean, in a way, that's all any of this is about. Putting something on an altar, guiding our walking, sitting in a certain way, remaining still. What are we doing? We're listening. We're seeing. We're feeling. We're experiencing, hopefully. Or are we just effectively asleep? So let's listen to the bell. Thich Nhat Hanh used to talk about this as the voice of the Buddha. It's not the only one to do so. You know, in one sense you can think kind of, oh yeah, nice and woofy, but actually no, listen. You've got this initial transient, and then the sound swirls, and then it settles onto this steady tone, which just decays gently and brings you into the soundscape of the world, whichever world you happen to be in. Now I can feel that, I can experience that. That has a full physiological effect on this physical being. That's not a meaning. Of course, it's not divorced entirely from meaning. I know it's the signal to sit. If I've been traumatised by the sound of a bowl bell, an entirely different reaction. But still, this is an embodied experience. And we were talking about Raksu last week. Having sown this, having put labour into it, having focus brought that kind of attention to it, it's meaningful, not in the sense of the meaning, but in terms of what it brings to the experience, the memory. And I think I said last week, difference is not identity. Identity is not separate. Difference is not hierarchy. And in a sense, so much of what we do is trying to challenge and upset our traditional hierarchies of attention, care, where we look towards, where we look away from. So that we pay attention, so that we bring awareness. And something like the sound of the bell invites us into a full bodily, psycho-physical, whatever words we want to use, experience. But, and here's the other half of the paradox, we do have to frame that. Just as in the way in the early years of the 20th century, painters discovered that actually you can put anything in a frame, and as soon as you put it in a frame, you start looking at it as a painting. A piece of white canvas, a piece of black canvas, a comic book cartoon. Then we discovered that the frame wasn't necessary. We could just simply put it in an art gallery, leave it lying around there. Because everything is our experiencing, which comes in that sense from us. I look at it, and I give it a particular kind of specialness, a specialness which invites my attention, invites my contemplation. I always have to start from here, though. From this body, this space, this Zoom connection. And it's special. Sharing this moment with you is unbelievably special. But it's a particular kind of special. It's a special which invites us to a particular kind of attention, which hopefully we then just carry out away with us into the world. And if we're setting up special and non-special, are we doing this flexibly? Are we doing this impermanently? Are we doing this non-exclusively? Can we have both and rather than an either or? Yes and no. How do we manage our specialness in a world where we know that nothing is special? When my daughters were little, they had a wonderful headmaster primary school. So that's 6 to 11 years old. Mr. Bocock. Very often in assembly he'd say, everyone is special in their own way. And of course when parents got to hear about this, they go, yeah, of course, everyone could be special. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to come top, somebody's going to come bottom. But of course in a Zen sense, in a Buddhist sense, he was absolutely right. Because when we're not setting up permanently, when we're just using whatever it is, whether it's a Buddha or something my wife gave me or whatever, to point to the specialness of everything. But as this thing here, as this moment, because it's always this moment and this thing, then really it's perfectly true. If nothing is special, then everything can be, in its own way, here, now, in this place, at this time, wherever, whenever that is.